After Sony's press conference at this year's Paris Games Week, which featured some pretty grim trailers, there's been a lot of chatter. That's a lot of chatter about violence and serious themes in video games and the trailers for those video games. So yeah, that's right, this is going to be an extra fun edition of Pretty Good Gaming. Fun. Domestic abuse. Yeah.
Sony unveiled a slew of new titles at Paris Game Week 2017, and there was a lot of interesting looking games on display. But two games in particular were a bit controversial. The titles in question were Detroit Become Human and The Last of Us Part 2, both of which look like they will contain some pretty mature content. Starting with Detroit, the trailer showed off an in-game scenario where the player controls an android who was given the choice to protect a young girl from her abusive father. The scenario plays out differently depending on the choices made by the player. If the player chooses to protect the girl, the player character steps in to protect the girl from harm, and it seems like she escapes. However, the player can also choose to do nothing, and it is implied that the young girl dies. As the showcase came to an end, Sony debuted a new trailer for The Last of Us Part 2, which was darker and a bit more explicit in its violence.
The Last of Us trailer introduced some new characters, and well, they weren't having a good time, to be honest. These new characters were involved in quite a disturbing situation, in fact, which included, honestly, things like lynching, torture, and mutilation. All of this was shown in graphic detail. There was no cutaways or transitions. None of it was implied or in any way obscured. We saw everything as it happened. That was all streamed live at a public media conference in late afternoon or early evening with just one age warning, which came at the very beginning of the stream. Following the press conference, discussion pieces quickly appeared online about what was shown off, and some entertained the notion that Sony may have gone too far with what they showed.
I think it's important that we make the distinction here. People are commenting about these trailers, okay? Too much graphic violence in these trailers. They're not talking about the games themselves. The games themselves are fine. They can do what they want. They'll be age rated. They'll have restrictions on the people watching or playing those games. Whereas these trailers, it was at the middle of the day in here in the UK, it was like 4 p.m. You know, it's accessible for anyone. Anyone on YouTube could have tuned in and watched it. And the only age rating or mature content warning was at the very beginning of the stream, which was like 2 hours previous. So there was no indication that there was going to be any sort of graphic violence. It's very realistic. So this violence in the middle of the day, it wouldn't have washed in the movie industry on the movie trailer. Why did they get away with it here in the? Because it's a game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, context is everything, isn't it? And that's where a lot of the criticisms come from, just the actual platform that these things were showed off on. Like, not even a little icon at the bottom that just puts 18 or something like that for a little while, just some kind of warning that let people know that what was coming, and there was just nothing. And you have to remember that this came after, like, Guacamelee and all this stuff, and family-friendly games.
I'm a grown man, right? I'm years old, I shouldn't say. Cut that bit. I'm a grown man, and it had me squirming in my seat. I mean, I will be honest, there's not many times I'm exposed to that type of graphic violence, even in watching TV these days. There should have been a warning saying that this contains graphic violence, because that's exactly what it was. Yeah. It was, I don't know, it was
shocker. Now, it is worth saying that a lot of the discussion online around Detroit Become Human was largely positive. The developer's previous games are pretty well known for tackling serious subjects in quite a tasteful way, and David Cage, the director of Detroit, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls and Fahrenheit, has long been an advocate for serious storytelling in games. Cage believes games are an art form, and he thinks if games want to be taken seriously, then they need to deal with serious themes.
Talking about serious themes, you had to cut your own, finger off or something in Heavy Rain. He's all about that, isn't he, David Cage? But, that's art, isn't it, At
the Video Game BAFTAs in 2011, Cage spoke about storytelling in games, where he said, quote, "They're about being powerful, being the good guys against the bad guys. That's a very tiny part of what can be done. There are so many other stories to tell, so many other emotions to trigger. This is a fantastic new medium. We can do much more than we currently do with it."
This is where I really agree with David Cage. It is an awesome new medium, and there's more, I mentioned it in a previous video, but there's more adults now playing games than ever. 35 years old is the average age of gamers. There is a lot of potential to portray very complicated, gritty, dark themes in games. And Hellblade did it recently with the whole psychosis, and I think games should be doing more of this and catering more adult themes for adults. Gaming is seen as a child's hobby. It's not. That isn't the case. And I think the more developers like David Cage that are out there willing to tackle these types of themes, I think the better for me, because I like those types of games. The discussion around the trailer for The Last of Us Part 2 raised different concerns though, specifically about the use of extreme graphic violence in video game trailers. It's hard to disagree the footage which was shown by Naughty Dog was incredibly brutal, and the realistic graphics, animations and voice acting only amplified the brutality. Polygon published an opinion piece which labelled the trailer as gratuitous because the audience had no context for the scene that they were witnessing. They also came to the conclusion that the trailer may have been using the scenes of graphic violence as a way to sell the game. The article called for Sony to stop using violent trailers as a way to sell the game to a mature audience. MCV asked if Sony's show was just too damn grim, while the UK's Daily Telegraph even interviewed Sony exec Jim Ryan, in which he defended the decision to show the mature content. But this isn't the first time The Last of Us drew criticism for scenes of brutal violence. The first game was also the subject of similar criticisms, and the game's director Neil Druckmann said the violence was integral to the game's story.
Speaking at the time, Neil Druckmann said, quote, "The violence you see inside this world isn't gratuitous and over the top just for the sake of being violent. It's setting a tone. It's setting a reality that Joel and Ellie are having to deal with. Everything has to feel tense. Everything has to feel grounded in reality. The reason why we're going for such realistic violence is because we want you to believe that the stakes are high for Ellie and Joel." In defending the latest Last of Us trailer, Sony executive Jim Ryan told The Telegraph, quote, "The Last of Us obviously is a game made by adults to be played by adults. And there's that market for those people who like that sort of game. Adults who like that sort of game. I should never prejudge this, but it will probably be rated 18, I think it's fair to say. I thought The Last of Us Part 2 was a great way to end the show, and I feel very good about it." I do kind of agree with Polygon here when they say that it's context that's important, and the sheer lack of context, no relation to who these characters are, nothing outside it. It's just basically a scene of torture with no setup and nothing leading us into it. It's just a cold open that's kind of taken us into something horrible that happens and then it ends. There's no context there, so it's hard for us to draw an emotional reaction that isn't just, oh god, what's happening? I also think personally that the biggest issue in The Last of Us's case is the way that it is just used to sell the game. Like, it's like shock factor. It's like, oh, look how crazy and hardcore and gritty this is. Buy the game. And also in Detroit's case, where it's like, maybe that's where the criticism comes from there. To be honest, I didn't have that much of a problem with it. I thought it was tackling a difficult theme, and it was one of those kind of sci-fi questions that takes a modern day situation and throws it forward into the future. And I was thinking about that stuff a little bit more, like about the android stuff, and that the android's got a conscience and the android has to that. So that's what I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about the domestic violence thing, but maybe people might have an issue with the idea of using domestic violence to sell a game.
It's a quite mixed bag for me, because these are the two games that I was most excited about seeing, and these are the two games that I'm most excited about playing, even before coming into this live stream, because of the adult themes and because grittiness and the dark themes and things like that. And those are the things that make them stand out from the crowd for me, and I think they have to show off a little bit of that to try and sell the game. But do they have to go to the extreme of showing the graphic violence that they did in Last of Us Part 2?
Yeah.
I don't think they need to go that far. I think there's ways to be able to show that there is these themes in the game without actually showing the physical harm happening on the screen.
That comes down to editing and the decisions of where they've put the camera in the games and stuff. You can show the hammer coming down and not actually
cut to reaction of someone else's face.
Exactly, so not show it making contact or something like that. There's many things that they could have done, but they chose not to because they wanted it to be shocking and harsh and gritty. And they're going for, like, you know, the movie The Road or something, where it's an absolutely terrible, brutal, horrible world that you don't want to be a part of. They wanted to make it clear that that's what the game is going to be, and it was a decision to show that kind of violence. Whether or not that's the right decision, I don't know, but the main thing is just the lack of warning beforehand. They just needed a warning, didn't they, at the end of the day?
I don't think they've addressed that at all. But Jim Ryan and Neil Druckmann have commented. They're saying, the game has themes. We have to show that these themes. That's fine. But don't show the graphic violence in the trailer at 4 p.m, like live on YouTube, where anybody could be tuning in. Anybody is tuning in and watching this stuff. You need to warn people.
Well, that is quite a big topic, isn't it? I mean, violence and serious themes in video games. But what do you think about all this and Sony's conference at the Paris Games Week? Let us know down in the comments. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this every single day. Check out that video right there, which you can watch right now, and the link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. See you next time.